ma'am. What? Okay, well, we'll take care of that. Okay. Today it's the revolution. It was not televised because there was no television back then.
The revolution gotta be televised. Yeah, we got you.
Well, start we go. The French Revolution, the Estates General, the National Assembly, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, the Civil Constitution of the Clergy, the Legislative Assembly, the National Convention, the Reign of Terror, the storming of the Bastille, Maximilien Robespierre, the Directory, the coup of 18 Fructidor and the coup of 18 Brumaire. I'll explain just what those words actually mean. And the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Right.
It's hard to underestimate the impact of the French Revolution on the course of French history, European history, and the history of the world. Completely overturn the existing order in Europe. The 19th century would be basically a reaction against the French Revolution. France has holidays dedicated to the French Revolution. The very flag of France is dedicated to the French Revolution. A lot of wars are fought over the French Revolution, affecting the entire world, the United States, Asia, Africa, the whole of Europe. A lot of important literature is inspired by it. War and Peace, that infamously long Russian novel is based on incidents from the French Revolution. Maybe one of the most famous was inspirations was Tale of Two Cities, a great book by Charles Dickens, a great commentator on British life, mid-19th century. He wrote the book in 1859. Tale of Two Cities has probably the greatest and most familiar opening of any book of the 19th century. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The age of wisdom was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. The spring of hope is the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period is so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insist on its being received for good or for evil, in superlative degree of comparison only. There were a king with a large jaw and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. There were a king with a large jaw and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. Both countries as clear than crystal to the lords of state, preserves of loaves and fishes, that things in general were settled forever. It was the year of our Lord, 1775, when it begins the story. Spiritual revelations were conceded to England at that favorite period as at this. France, less favored on the whole to matters spiritual than her sister, the shield and trident, rode with exceeding smoothness downhill, making paper money and spending it. Under the guidance of her Christian pastor, she entertained herself, besides such humane achievements as sentencing a youth to have his hands cut off, his tongue torn out with pincers, his body burned alive, because he had not kneeled down in the rain to do honor to a dirty procession of monks which had passed within his view, a distance of 50 or 60 yards. It is likely enough that in the rough outhouses of some tillers of the heavy lands adjacent to Paris, they were sheltered from the weather that very day, rude carts, scattered rustic mire snuffed about by pigs, and roosted in by poultry, which the farmer at death had already set apart to be his tumbrils of the revolution. That woodman, that farmer, though they had worked unceasingly, worked silently, and no one heard them as they went about their muffled tread. The rather for as much as to entertain any suspicions they were awake, to be atheistical and traitorous. In England there is scarcely an amount of order and protection justified much national boasting. Daring burglaries by armed men and highway robberies took place in the capital itself every night. Families were publicly cautioned not to go out of town without removing the furniture and upholsterers' warehouses for security. The highwayman in the dark was a city tradesman in the light. Being recognized and challenged by his fellow tradesman, whom he thought his character of the captain, he only shot him through the head as it rode away. The mail was waylaid by 7 robbers. The guard shot 3 dead, and then got shot dead himself by the other 4 in consequence of the failure of ammunition, at which the mail was robbed in peace. And nobody thought any of these occurrences much out of the common way. In the midst of them, the hangman, ever busy and ever worse than useless, was in constant requisition, now stringing up long rows of miscellaneous criminals, now hanging a housebreaker on Saturday who had been taken on Tuesday, now burning people in hand at Newgate by the dozen, now burning pamphlets at the door of Westminster Hall today, taking the life of an atrocious murderer, and tomorrow a wretched pilferer had robbed a farmer's boy of 6 pence. All these things and 1,000 like them came to pass in and close upon the dear old year 1775. Environed by them, while the woodman and farmer worked unheeded, those 2 with the large jaws and the other 2 with the plain and fair faces trod to stir enough and carry their divine rights to the high hat. Thus did the year 1775 conduct their greatnesses, and myriad small creatures that chronicle among the rest, along the roads that lay before them. Tale of 2 Cities. It's a great book, and all inspired by these events we're studying. Except those toiling with their voices unheeded, those living under injustices.
Did the book have anything to do with the political, did the book of that the political things itself?
The book, a lot of Dickens's writings had inspired a lot of work in England to help with the poor and the problems of poverty, of orphans, and so forth. But remember, the books are in 1859, decades after all this happened. But France is bankrupt, realizing problems are so deep that it has to basically completely reorganize its government, completely reorganize the entire system. And so Louis XVI, King of France, reluctantly calls the Estates General into session. Remember, the Estates General is organized among the 3 social classes of France as it existed in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
The nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry. Now, the peasants weren't all poor at this point. Because of international trade, you have a very rising, very prosperous middle class. Not in large numbers, but it's there. But some of them are so wealthy to the point that they're actually wealthier than some of the nobility, some of whom have fallen on hard times for one reason or another. Some of them actually have managed to buy titles from these downtrodden nobles.
Again, define nobility so that I understand.
Nobility,
the people that were born.
the men of
into
title, the
right.
men who are members of the extended royal family.
Right. Okay.
They could buy a title.
Yeah. Take a lot of money to do, but you can do it. So titles traditionally are given by the king and passed down from one generation to the next. But like I said, if you're poor enough, desperate enough, and somebody come on with enough money, you can sell that title.
Even if it was like the highest title you can get, you still don't know.
You can still sell it off if you wanted to. Like I said, it was transferable, something the king frowned upon, but not a lot they could do about it. And as you have these up and coming merchant class, they have wealth, they have everything they need except the influence. And they need the title to get the influence.
Right.
That's okay. Like, could they lose their title? Well,
The
like,
king could strip it from them for one reason or another, but that very rarely happened. But basically, you bought the title, and it's considered to be legally transferred.
but it could, like, you could, like, go broke, right?
Yeah, you can go broke.
Oh, and you wouldn't matter that well. I was watching.
Yeah, you can have. There was a problem of a lot of titled nobles in France who were bankrupt.
Mhm.
They had no money.
I was watching a movie and it was like the guy was trying to marry a girl with money because his estate was broke. His daddy's estate was broke. The movie Bill.
Yeah, and things like that would happen every so often. So you got to remember, marriage for love and romance only came along in Europe in the last few centuries. More than basically it was a property arrangement.
Right.
Like I say, arranged marriages were especially still common this time period in the upper classes. Basically try to hold property, expand property holdings, political influence. Actually did more out of obligation than out of love. Bring this up. So they have to hold elections for the Estates General. 1,200 delegates. Most of them are in the peasant class, which took up 97% of the population. Because of the make of the Estates General, they only get a third of the vote. They vote as the separate estates. And of course, they're all going to Louis XVI's palace at Versailles outside Paris. A huge, ornate complex, 800s of acres, all intricately maintained, the highest and most opulent luxuries you can possibly imagine. That's it. No kings live there today, basically because of this.
He's still staying.
It still stands.
Wow.
Actually, it's in a museum today. They toured
They
it
keep it
anytime.
updated and stuff. They keep it maintained.
Yeah, they keep it maintained. Modest updates, but basically it's pretty much all intact. It's after the French Revolution, it's used occasionally for diplomatic retreats and so forth, diplomatic negotiations. The treaty ending World War I was negotiated at Versailles. Well, the Estates General shows up at Versailles and filled with these ideas of the Enlightenment, inspiration and success of the American Revolution. The peasants decide, let's put aside tradition, because they hadn't met since 1614, say, we meet as one body, as one national assembly, one voice for the people of France. It will not be divided among these medieval fault lines anymore. Well, they decided to vote on it. You have a lot of the sympathetic members of the clergy. They're all Roman Catholic. Some priests and bishops are wanting to go along. The peasants are overwhelmingly in favor of it. But just enough members of the clergy and the nobility swing it to where they decide, no, we're not going to vote as a National Assembly, we're still going to vote as the three separate states. That's the first big issue when they convened in May 1789, in late May 1789. So, undaunted, June 17th, members of the Third Estate and members of the clergy unite to form the National Assembly. Decide, well, we've got the numbers here, we're going to do it anyway. And on June 23rd, they met and took what's called the tennis court oath. Basically, an indoor tennis court at the Palace of Versailles. Look here on page 582, the very famous stirring portrait of the tennis court oath. Meeting here and deciding they will stay here at the tennis court and not be dispersed until the king recognizes them as a national assembly.
What page you say?
582.
Kind of like protesting.
Yeah, they're protesting. Basically, Louis XVI's worst nightmare has come true. The Estates General has met at Versailles, and you've got a near riot on his hands.
Could you just kill him?
That is one option, but it would ruin the carpet. This is a serious issue you have to face here. So, his choices. He could send the army in to kill them all, but rather than the States General, he invited these people to his home, basically. They're there to solve his problems with France, and having the army shoot them all, that could cause some bad public relations incidents.
And they probably have money, so that means that.
Yeah. Actually, he could do that. Actually, there were attempts to bribe here and there, but didn't work. Or he could give in and just say, okay, we'll have the National Assembly. Wait him out.
So was the tennis court was at Versailles?
Yeah, that's at
So
Versailles.
they refused to leave the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, basically, we're staying here until you recognize us. They got hundreds of men here saying, we are the National Assembly, we'll be recognized as the National Assembly. Actually, the king just does not want, really just didn't want to have to call in the army over this, because it's basically undermined everything he's trying to do. One problem with the Louis XVI is he has problems making decisions. Louis XIV, yeah, he would have sent in the army and made people declare a national holiday to him to thank him for it. That's not Louis XVI. Remember, Louis XVI is not too bright. He's not too interested in how things operate. He's having problems making decisions because he's completely untrained. He spent so much of his life so uninterested in everything, and now he has to make all these decisions. And he's overwhelmed and confused. So, after a few days, Louis XVI recognizes the National Assembly. So, okay, it'll be recognized as one body. And the people are jubilant. Like say, celebrations in Paris, celebrations among the delegates, and the National Assembly begins operating as the national government, as basically the parliament, and begins a wholesale series of debates and plans on how to reorganize the laws to give civil liberties to all the people. The people had none before, finally they will. But what ended up happening, though, was they lifted the cap on all the frustrations that been bottled up for decades. They were poor, the desperate. Now finally they have that glimmer of hope. Said the people were hungry, due to starvation. Said the king, on previous occasions, there was a shortage or famine, he would, the royal family would give grain to the cities to distribute to the people, but it was only a loan. They had to pay back the money. They had to pay for it.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
No, that's not charity.
It's not charity.
That's a loan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was loan sharking.
Yeah.
Again, understand about France. In terms of size, it is one of the larger countries on the continent of Europe, but it is overpopulated. And because it's still basically a half-feudal system, the land is large, it's not being used as full productive capacity. Except roads are very poor, so a wide road, a royal highway might be, say, the distance between the dirt road, the distance between these two desks here. About 3 or 4 feet wide, barely wide enough for carriage. And so, France is always one bad harvest away from famine. In the 1780s, they're having bad harvests. People are hungry. And so you have this very deeply frustrated group of the lower classes in Paris. They're going to start driving this revolution more and more and more. A group called the Sans-Culottes. Sans-Culottes means basically without pants. Now see, look how these men are dressed here on page 582. Like I say, this is, yeah, it means without fancy dress slacks. The kind of pants these guys are wearing, this 18th century style business suit. You know, got the overcoat, the vest, the nice lace neckties and everything, basically. Not really variation on this. And the pants, the slacks they're wearing, don't go all the way down to their shoes. Now they have these knee-high stockings, lace stockings, and they tuck this pants, the culottes, into that. Basically, these are not men who can afford nice clothing. It's sans culottes. Basically, they're the poor. So they'll not be dressed up as nice and formally as businessmen or members of the National Assembly or anything like that. They are dirt poor. And it's a frustration, this very large mass of desperately poor people driving this phase of the French Revolution. Egged on by what can be called the Fourth Estate, all of the newspapers saying, National Assembly needs to do this. We need to address the problems of poverty and hunger. We need to, National Assembly needs to work faster to deal with this problem, to give the people their rights. And the National Assembly was making a lot of progress, but it wasn't fast enough. And part of the problem is the monarchy's not helping itself either. They're trying to drag its feet, trying to prevent any of these changes from happening. Basically because they don't want to have to listen to anybody. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to make any decisions. So they're doing nothing to help the problems of poverty. The National Assembly's trying to deal with it, but they're trying to deal with a king who doesn't want anything done. Plus the fact, the problem of this woman, Marie Antoinette. Yeah, Marie Antoinette was the daughter of Austrian Empress Maria Theresa. It was an arranged royal marriage, and she is sent at the age of 14 to marry Louis XVI.
Was how old?
Maybe about 16 or 17, maybe.
And they was going to let him get married?
Yeah.
That was very common at that time.
Oh my God.
This is a different time period. Being married 14, 15 was not at all unusual.
Yeah, I think they're dying by 20.
And basically, this is an attempt to ally the French and Austrian thrones. This is before Louis XVI became king. It's a very bizarre thing. Basically, it was a couple of years before they basically consummated the marriage because he was just that inept. Except Antoinette was not a bad-looking woman, just the guys. Yeah. And the French royal court is really weird. Everything's symbolic. I say, the Queen gives birth. Everybody's watching. It's the royal birth. Oh my gosh, it's an amazing, beautiful thing. But no privacy. Even the wedding night was being watched by people.
Like looking.
They're watching. Yeah. No, these are messed up people.
Now they will see.
And Marie Antoinette, part of this idle, rich, basically had absolutely nothing to do. So she didn't raise her own kids. She had nannies and everybody else to do that for her. So what did she do? The king bought her a couple of estates in the country to visit once in a while, and she actually, in this one little state, built this little model French village, where she dressed up like a peasant, and they're going to all the shops and everything. Basically, she's pretending to be a peasant,
Oh my goodness.
mocking
That's my dream.
the real problems peasants are facing every day. To her, it's just a game. To them, it's life and death.
Instead of trying to help.
Yeah. Except she gave a little bit of money once in a while, but basically she's making fun of them. But she's so dim-witted she doesn't understand she is. There's the story about how one day the Parisian housewives, during this time period, summer 1789, marched to Versailles because so poor, they're hungry, they're starving. Story, and how much of it is actually true and how much of it has kind of been exaggerated over time, we're not quite sure, but basically there was an encounter between Marie Antoinette and these Parisian housewives, the sans-culottes. And it shows us how out of touch and how uncaring she really was about the situation. How much of it actually was true, how much happened, I'm not sure, but basically the stories just kept circling for years showing just how bizarre her perspective was. The Parisian housewife saying, "We have no bread." And Marie Antoinette saying, "They don't have bread, okay. Can't they eat cake?" I mean, it's a wheat product. Yeah, slice of ham on cake. Yeah, that's a nutritious meal. But basically, she didn't understand that the people are so poor, they can't afford wheat. They can't afford bread, much less cake. They probably never had a piece of cake in their lives. But Marie Antoinette is just so inept. She's doing so much harm. Her ignorance is just doing such harm to the monarchy. It's just beyond calculation. And everybody starts to hate her.
So that's why she's like the most infamous woman in the 1700s.
Exactly. Because, like I say, she had all this power and all this money. She could do something. She could ask around, said, what's the deal with these people? Because they're hungry, they're starving. So, you'd probably give them some money and help feed them. But she doesn't do that.
They didn't have advisors?
They did, but basically they're ignoring them. So, okay, I'll just a little bit of money here for charity. Shouldn't that fix it all? Just completely out of touch with the concerns and needs of the people. While their condition worsened, she, of the idle rich, basically lived a life of luxury and lavish ignorance.
Yeah, I said lavish crazy.
It just kind of shows the divide to the monarchs, the way they're living. That seems perfectly normal.
So how would middle class people live? Was it like a middle class?
There wasn't much of one, but there was. It basically lived kind of like we do. We have our own homes. We have our means getting point A to point B. We have our jobs. Like I say, we have enough money to get by. So not to live lavishly, but enough to get by. Bills are paid. And I said, we don't have to worry where our next meal comes from. Except basically, we have poverty in this country.
True.
Horrible poverty. A lot of you have lived in poverty. Like I say, but nothing compared to the poverty of people living in Paris. Nothing compared to the poverty a lot of parts of the world are living in today.
True.
Like I said, we could have it a lot better, but we could have it a lot worse too. And like I say, again, the silver shows the divide because this is normal to them. But middle class, the working classes of America, 18th, 19th, 20th century, it just makes absolutely no sense. It's insane. Like I say, somebody with that much money and that many problems that they have the power to do something, but they're not. I mean, all these strange ceremonies that mean absolutely nothing to anything.
If we're talking about the English with list, this is that.
Like I say, and county household, the idea of throwing out perfectly good food just seems a sin.
Did the middle class throw out food?
No, you saved as much as you could, ate as much as you could.
Just the
Like I say, if it just, the only reason you wouldn't eat something after a couple of days because it was spoiled, no way you really store it very well.
We kind of do that today, though. Like, just imagine how much food the restaurants throw out.
Oh yeah, foods and grocery stores and everything. It's it. Like I said, that's just an issue. Just
a law that says that they can't throw it out anymore.
yeah. Like I said, showing us how much France has changed since those days. That if you have perfectly good food, give it to the poor. If you can't sell it. But
Because we done that predicament. I don't think there's poor people here, but there's poor people there.
Yeah, say the poor here compared to the poor in the rest of the
Not even
world.
poor. I mean, sure. Did I say that? Yeah.
Actually, we have people in this country who are hungry. That is, they may end up going a day or two without eating because they don't have the money to do it, but we're not starving.
No.
Right.
We're giving away food.
Yeah.
Homeless folks.
Like I say, but Marie Antoinette, Louis XVI, just blissfully unaware just how deep the problems are. Completely out of touch. But the National Assembly continues. They start passing laws and eliminating the last vestiges of feudalism. On August 27th, they passed the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. This is 8/27, 1789. This is an important document in the history of France. A revolutionary document. It's basically their version of the Bill of Rights. Let's see into the here on page 584, see an excerpt from it. The representatives of the French people organized as a National Assembly, considering that ignorance, neglect, and scorn of the rights of man are the sole causes of public misfortunes, the corruption of governments, are resolved to display in a solemn declaration of the natural, inalienable, and sacred rights of man, that this declaration constantly in the presence of all members of society will continually remind them of their rights and their duties. Consequently, the rights the National Assembly recognizes and declares in the presence and under the auspices of the Supreme Being the following rights of man and citizen. 1. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions can be established only for the common benefit. And where the United States borrowed heavily from John Locke, they're borrowing very heavily from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Social contract and all that. Men are free and equal. The aim of every political association is the conservation of the natural and prescriptible rights of man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and the resistance to oppression. 4, basically the definition of freedom. Liberty consists in being able to do anything that does not harm another person. Basically, people should be able to do whatever they want so long as they don't hurt anybody else. 6, the law is the expression of the general will. Again, going back to Rousseau. All citizens have the right to concur personally or through their representatives in its formation. It must be the same for all, whether it protects or punishes. All citizens, being equal in its honors, are equally admissible to all honors, positions, and public employments, according to their capabilities, without other distinctions than those of their virtues and talents. Essentially saying, all offices, all honors are open to all people. The laws will affect everyone equally. Be no exemptions for anyone, no exemptions for punishments or the laws because you're a member of the upper classes. Those days are gone. No man can be accused, arrested, or detained except in cases determined by the law and according to the forms which is prescribed. No one may be disturbed because of his opinions, even religious, provided their public demonstration does not disturb the public order established by law. Free communication of thoughts and opinions is one of the most precious rights of man. Every citizen can therefore freely speak, write, and print. 15, skipping down a little bit. Society has the right to demand accounting of its administration for every public agent. 16, any society which guarantees of rights are not assured, nor the separation of powers determined, has no constitution. 17, property being an inviolable and sacred right, no one to be private unless public necessity, legally determined, and clearly requires such action, then only on condition of a just and prior indemnity. It basically can't take property without compensation. Again, somewhere, American Bill of Rights, the Fifth Amendment. Essentially, these are the rights of the citizens of France from now on. It will be a free state. People shall have justice, due process, the right to speak their mind, the right to their own property, and there's no longer any distinction in law between the upper and lower classes. National Assembly that month would also repeal the last vestiges of feudalism. All remaining feudal obligations for rural residents were now terminated. Didn't have to do anything they didn't want to do. And all were tied by any debt or obligation. And so French began, more and more began hearing what they call the Ancien Regime, refers to the French Revolution. Ancien Regime basically means the ancient regime, the old regime, the way things used to be. Things are changing very rapidly, but still the economic problems, because it sans-culottes is changing. The National Assembly has passed some very important reforms. They've modernized their laws, created a Bill of Rights, certain guarantees of liberty for the people, but which are nice, but people can't eat. They can speak their opinion more loudly. You can say, we're starving. In October, you have a period of the revolution called the October Days. It's a period of restlessness as the crops are coming in, so things still aren't changing much. Yeah. Finally, it's kind of boiling over. On October 5th, 1789, people, Paris, frustrated, stormed the fortress of the Bastille in the heart of Paris. This day, October 5th, is still a holiday in France, Bastille Day.
You said 1789 or 1792?
1789. Except the Bastille, actually, it was an old medieval castle in Paris. It was originally built for defensive purposes, but centuries and everything wore on. Its strategic importance wasn't had declined. Basically, by this point, the Bastille simply meant to store ammunition, but it was also put a prison. Except critics of the king, thieves and so forth, will be locked up in the Bastille. They're usually beaten and tortured, sometimes executed, but wasn't used all that often, but it became a hated symbol of the king's tyranny and authority. So even though the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen had wiped all this claim, the Bastille is still in operation as a prison. It's still a symbol of the hated authority of the king. So angry Parisians, you can see here on page 586, sans-culottes, men and women alike, they stormed the Bastille on this day, free the political prisoners inside, 7 altogether.
So all those are women?
Yeah, in this case it's women. It says combination of men and women alike. There's March of Versailles and so forth. But, yeah. When was it Bastille? Mixed up. There it is. July 14th.
Say there were 7 prisoners?
7 prisoners inside. My days all confused here. October days, that's coming up. July 14th, Bastille Day. Like I said, that's the holiday. Days all confused here. What happens here with the Bastille Day is, when people had initially celebrated the revolution and everything, and danced in the streets, it's been a little bit violent. Because here with the Bastille, storming of the Bastille, not only did the men and women of Paris free these political prisoners, but they killed the commander of the Bastille, and then went in and killed the mayor of Paris, and set up their own administration.
No,
They were serious here. They
They
set up a new flag,
Right.
mere French tricolor, the blue, white, and red. And the king recognized this new administration's king increasingly unable to figure out how to do anything. Say, okay, I accept it. He's wearing a little blue, white, and red.
So these were poor people?
Yeah, the Sans-Culottes did this.
That's normally what makes it happen.
Seeing him wearing the blue, white, and red symbol in his hat. But everything's just getting worse and worse because the king's trying to obstruct everything. He makes little concessions here and there. Okay, you get to pick your own mayor of Paris. Okay, you got the National Assembly, but he's not really changing everything. Except the king would rather this not have happened at all. Abolition of feudalism, that's what he was looking for at this calling the States General into session. Everything's flying out of control. He sees his authority slipping away day after day. So he's doing whatever he can to slam the brakes on the process, but that's just frustrating the National Assembly more and more. They can't get anything done. And meanwhile, the people of Paris, they aren't seeing anything getting done. The king and his government aren't doing anything. They're still just as poor. They're still just on the edge of starvation before. And so, by October, after a couple of days of protests and unrest, people of Paris decide they're going to go out that 20 miles to see the king himself, to explain their objections a little more clearly to him. Well, the king and the National Assembly are still here. And enraged over the king's delays and obstructions, Parisians go, they surround the Palace of Versailles, and tell the king that he and the National Assembly are returning to Paris, the capital, so they could more closely watch them. The king could have called out the army, decided not to. Instead, basically he and the royal family all get in their carriage and ride to their palace in Paris. They realize at this point they're prisoners.
The king was?
Yep. They realize that he may be a king, but he's a prisoner now. He cannot leave Paris. Saying his chances of having called out the army to put this down more are slipping away day by day, hour by hour. He's basically has to give in and accept his fate. Well, things kind of drift along for a while, stabilizing for the moment, but 1791, the Civil Constitution of the Clergy is passed. What's happening during all this is, you have to remember, the Roman Catholic Church had long played a political role in the life of the French government. Like I said, they had cardinals acting as important government ministers and advisors. They had cardinals acting as regents for the young kings. And basically, the kings, they are appointing cardinals to these important positions, not because of any ecclesiastical reason, not because of their position in the church, but because they need these people in certain positions because of their political influence. The church is a political tool in France at this point. Remember, they're a third of the old States General. They're also the largest landholder in France. And as the National Assembly dragged on, it was the members of the clergy who are the loudest critics of it. They're trying to stir up and foment insurrections and protests against the National Assembly for its attacks on the monarchy and attacks on the church. But by 1791, led a frustrated National Assembly to declare that the church, since it is acting in a political role, be treated as it is in a political role. All church offices are now open for everyone and open for subject to election.
That's why.
Civil constitution of clergy. Says the people will be voting for cardinals, for bishops, even their local parish priest.
Was it some of those people are the National Assembly?
Some of them were, yes. Actually, and a lot of members of the clergy radical members of the clergy supported this.
Right.
But okay, let's make this position elected.
So what you're saying that clergy was somewhat kind of like the nobility, or was it something?
Yeah, a
else
lot of
that
cases
just
the
kind of
clergy,
rolled?
the upper members of the clergy, the
Right.
bishops and the cardinals,
Right.
those higher up on the totem pole, they were upper class. They got those positions because they were born into it.
Right.
Or, well, let's say, because their family had connections.
Okay.
Like I said, priests can't marry. Some of them had girlfriends on the side. A lot of them had girlfriends on the side,
I'm good with that.
but they weren't supposed to because of the Roman Catholic
Exactly.
tradition. A priest is married to the church.
I understand.
His obligation, first, foremost, and only obligation is to God.
So they
And a family's a distraction. Yeah, no wives. But a lot of them are having girlfriends on the side anyway.
Oh,
That's still an issue in the Roman Catholic Church today.
Right.
People saying priests should marry up priesthood to more people, but a lot of people saying actually the priest should be married to the church, family be a distraction. Like I say, it's different from the Protestant tradition. Protestant faith, priests can get married, but not Roman Catholics. Not
so
Roman
they
Catholic priests.
can't get married?
Roman Catholic priests cannot ever get married.
Right.
Neither can a nun.
Nuns can't either. Nuns are considered to be brides of Christ. They marry, like they marry church. They marry Jesus,
Right.
and they are basically to devote themselves to the church for the rest of their lives. They cannot get married.
Oh, wow.
So priests and nuns take an oath of celibacy. If you were to deny earthly pleasures as much as possible, you take an oath of celibacy. You take an oath of poverty. No money. No girlfriends, no wives, no family, except for your parents, your brothers and sisters. But actually,
You said brothers and sisters.
yeah, 'cause they still have their brothers and sisters, but they cannot have a family of their own. They cannot have children.
No, she heard that in the wrong context.
Yeah.
She just heard your brother and sister because she was talking. And that's why she's like, I don't know, that was in the wrong context. You heard that in the wrong context.
Except,
Let me help you out, sister.
actually, we're talking about here as Roman Catholic, and say most people in here are Protestants. So maybe only a handful of Roman Catholics. Like I say, it's a very different perspective between the Protestant and Catholic tradition. I say Catholic tradition, priesthood is an honored position. Mothers push their sons to be priests because that means they're going straight to heaven, guaranteed.
Right.
Like I say, a very prestigious position. And a deeply devoted, faithful Roman Catholic will all say, hey, no problem, I have the church, that's all I need. Some are fine with giving up, giving up not ever getting married or having a girlfriend or having an oath of poverty because they're serving God. That's enough. In the Roman Catholic tradition, it is the church that appoints which priest goes to which church. Like I said, it's not something that's out by the congregation. It's that priest is put there by the church, take it or leave it. And if you leave it, you're going straight to hell. Next, it's considered.
Does the Pope have a wife?
No.
No.
Pope hasn't had a wife in 1,000 years.
No.
Like I said, Pope does not have a wife. He is the father of the church, and his first obligation is to the church. Like I said, there have been popes who have had girlfriends. The last Western civilization, talk about the Borgia Pope, Alexander VI, that he had several girlfriends and several legitimate children. Actually, the only reason he got away with it was the cardinals elected him. They had their own girlfriends at the same time.
Exactly.
They was doing it so they didn't mind human.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Actually, but in Protestant tradition, let's say the Episcopal Church, yeah, it's still the church appointing priests. Methodist Presbyterian, yeah, the church will appoint, but the local parish does have some say in this. Say, well, we really don't like this guy, can you give someone else? Baptist churches, the congregation or the deacons will elect the priest. They basically decide who the preacher is going to be. That's a decision of the church itself, but not in the Catholic tradition. But now the civil constitution of the clergy is saying, local parishes, you will elect your own priest. And because they had been so politicized before, okay, they're just going to make that formal.
It's on you.
And of course that upset a lot of people because they felt like the church should be separate from the concerns of the state. The church should be able to make its own policy and appoint its own priests. And politicizing it tainted it somehow.
But it was already politicized.
It was, but basically...
I mean, I'm just thinking whoever was in the National Assembly and said, hey guys, they want to be political, let's make them political.
Exactly.
Somebody
Exactly what they're thinking. A lot of people are saying, yes, there is problems of corruption here, but it's not supposed to be like this. Let's not formalize an already corrupt process. Let's fix and cleanse this corrupt process. The people of France saying, no, let's just go the way it is already. We're going to change it. If they want to be politicians, we'll make them politicians. So in addition to that, church lands were also seized and redistributed. But here's the problem with that. A lot of the peasants, they were farming these church lands in common. They didn't own the lands, but the church would allow them to farm and raise their own crops on the certain portions of church lands. It's kind of understood what belonged to who. And for a lot of people in these rural areas, a lot of these desolate poor villages, farming on church lands, that was basically their only means of survival. And now these lands are being seized and sold off by the French government, but somewhere along the line, the lands aren't going to the poor, they're going to the middle and upper classes. And some of these priests are deciding to, make a little something on the side, too.
Can you just, get your own seed or what have you, and then just kind of disappear into France somewhere? Do your own thing?
Basically, that's what these church lands are for. Get your own seed and just kind of start popping up on your own land. But France is a very ancient land. There are no open lands left like there would be in the United States at this point. So there is no frontier in France.
I mean, like individual family, hey, we're going to, take this little acre right here and keep...
Which in theory would work, but the thing is, that acre is already owned by somebody.
Right.
Actually, no homesteaders in France, like there would be in the United States. So the choice is either move to the cities, where basically there are very few jobs, stay where you are and try to make the best of it. A couple were able to find some farms here, or they go to work for one of the larger landowners, or leave France altogether, immigrate.
Were the lands really policed? So if somebody
That's what I was getting at.
if somebody did try to go hide.
Yeah, you did have a law enforcement system in place, and in some cases these landowners, they were the law enforcement for that area.
Okay.
They were
so
judge,
you were
jury,
in
and
danger
executioner.
of getting killed if you tried to plant on somebody else's land.
That's it. Trespassing is said to be various penalties for that, but basically the penalty would probably be just a public beating.
Oh my God. The lands were given back to the church.
Lands were taken from the church and just sold off. In fact, the resistance to the French Revolution, it is being stirred up by these bishops and cardinals who are trying to stop the civil clergy of the Constitution, trying to stop this from taking place. And now, once the civil Constitution of the clergy is in effect, they're using this to galvanize what the opposition is there, mostly in kind of the more far-flung rural areas of France. They get the faithful, most devoted members of the church to rally to the cause against the National Assembly. They say a counter-revolution. Again, a lot of the way able to do it is because these church lands are being sold away. Well, 1791, the National Assembly finally agrees on a new constitution. They create the Legislative Assembly. $745 delegates to be elected from the people and meet in Paris to discuss the problems of people. But here's the thing, these insurrections start up by the church and the more radical monarchists, they're spreading throughout France. So basically now France is dealing with the issue of a simmering civil war. So they have to try to clamp down on this, regain control of the situation, and continue this process of democratic reforms while dealing with the problem of deep poverty. They got a lot on their hands. You see, the thing about the French Revolution is it's not this nice, steady progression. It's these radical steps, one government overturning another. Increasingly radical, increasingly out of control, getting to the point by the mid-1790s that nobody can control it at all. And that's the situation they're facing in 1791. Well, at this point, while the Legislative Assembly is trying to get things under control and having increasingly difficult problems under it, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette realize they have to get out of there. The army's not going to come to their rescue. No one's going to come to their rescue. If this civil war gets worse, it's out of control, they are a target. They decided they're going to leave France. But they're not abdicating, they're not resigning, they're just simply moving to a more hospitable climate, where they might be able to maybe organize some kind of resistance, or at least live as a king and queen in exile. So their hope is to go to Austria, Marie Antoinette's home. Her brother, Joseph had just been emperor, he just died. Her other brother's now the emperor. But they have to get out of Paris somehow. I mean, you don't have airplanes, you don't have helicopters. Like I said, they have to do it by carriage, they have to do it by horse. The thing is, though, people are watching. They can't just simply get in the carriage and ride out of town.
No.
People sound the alarm, be caught, and be herded back. They have to plan a careful escape. So they go through this very careful process. Say, okay, these two light, very fast carriages. We'll ride out before daylight, as fast as we can out of town, and head to the border. Like I said, it might be a day or two, but it'll be far enough ahead of everybody to be able to do it. Stay fast. But over time, plans changed, and Marie Antoinette said they decided she would be dressed as a maid, disguised as a maid. The king be disguised as a footman, basically somebody to take care of the carriage.
They probably had guards watching them.
Yeah. The guards were in on it. They said, okay, and they like them. But they knew which ones they could trust. They had some people helping them on the inside. They changed. Plans changed. So that, it's going to be a long ride, so uncomfortable. So they get this big, heavy carriage. They load it down with food and wine. So they're going to leave in style.
Right.
Okay, so it works. So Marie Antoinette is the maid. Louis XVI is the footman. They get this heavy carriage and they leave out Paris in the dead of night. But the next morning, by the time they realize it's gone, they're already way out of town. So they're riding out. Everything's going really well. No one seems to suspect a thing. No one's raising the alarms. No alarm in the countryside. So they're almost to the border. They decide, let's stop for a bite to eat. So they're getting down from this carriage, and let's go to this one little tavern, noticing something kind of familiar about this footman. I mean, it looks very familiar. He gets out a coin, and of course, French coins have a picture of the king's face on them. The king has escaped. They sound the alarm. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI are captured and brought back to Paris under guard.
Why would they degrade?
Oh, the people are furious. It basically thought the people have been, they have betrayed the people.
Why would they degrade to do the more private? Why would they?
No, they can't do it because it's still king and queen, still a monarchy.
Did they
So
try
what
to
did they
bring
do to
her-
them when they caught them?
What's that?
What did they do to them when they caught
Just
them?
basically put them under a guard, under a people's guard. They can't leave.
If they were smart, they wouldn't have stopped.
Exactly.
They did everything
But
they needed.
these aren't very intelligent people.
Did they bring their kids with them?
Yeah.
Huh.
Except Louis' brother and his family managed to escape. Louis stuck. So, feeling that Austria had been behind this, is trying to undermine the revolution. In April 1792, the Legislative Assembly and the people of France declares war on Austria. So now Austria is at war with France. They're sending their armies over. But they're increasingly more and more disorder, more chaos. They're trying to send supplies to the front, trying to put down these insurrections. And so the Legislative Assembly, by August 1792, establishes the Revolutionary Tribunal. That didn't slip right. Okay.
Yes.
Revolutionary Tribunal try to maintain order. So proceeding some rights, basically declaring martial law in some areas. It's all these rights they declared here, rights of man and citizen, being superseded by this Revolutionary Tribunal to try to maintain order, try to keep the revolution alive. It's getting to a point the revolution is now an end in itself. Not the goals of it, but just the very factor of the revolution must be kept alive. But they realized, though, by summer 1792, that the Legislative Assembly can't do the job. They need something else in place. So they call in the National Convention. Basically, they're getting together and deciding on how to form a new government that can deal with the problems of the Civil War, War of Austria, and the lingering monarchy. 749 delegates now. Let's see, Louis XVI is still king. This war's been going on for months, but the king is not pressing the war very hard. He's still commander of the military, but basically, if France win, what does Louis XVI win? Nothing. He's still a prisoner. If he loses, what does he win? Hey, the Austrians might put him back on the throne, full power again.
That's if it loses.
Yeah, it's if he loses. So he's really doesn't have a dog in this fight. But the National Convention decided the king and queen, by trying to escape, by fighting the will of the people in the revolution, they're traitors and they do not belong in power anymore. That the people should rule. And so on September 22nd, 1792, France declares itself to be a republic. A republic is declared. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI are kicked off the throne and put in a dungeon. And the body are put on trial for treason. And on January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette are executed.
What's that?
The children are kept in jail.
They tried to escape.
Yeah, based part of that, all these other things, basically they're declared to be traitors, basically because they symbolize the ancient regime and all the tyranny on the over the people, so therefore they must be executed.
1791 to 1792, when
Yeah.
they were officially put in dungeon, where were they?
They were still in Paris.
They were
At the
just
palace.
prisoners at the palace.
Yeah. And now, after September 22nd, they're prisoners in the dungeon. Children are as well.
January,
Yeah.
He's stupid.
Oh, yeah. The January 1793, they're beheaded. The children are kept in prison. They end up all dying in jail.
They had children. How many were there? Was there like 17 children? Or was that
Just a handful, like 4 or 5 children. But because they are because the monarchists, they are the symbol of the revolution. That's the problem is the monarchy is even if you're a child, you're still a symbol. They were symbols.
Correct.
Oh my God.
I hope